Welcome to the ISO Show, dispelling myths and sharing tips for success to improve your business with ISO standards, with your host, Mel Blackmore.
Hello and welcome to the ISO Show. Well, today I'm delighted to be joined by Gareth Dinnage, who's the Managing Director of Seacourt. Now, Seacourt is the winner of the Queen's Award for Sustainable Development, but they haven't just won it once, they've actually won it 3 times. And in 2017, they were crowned Europe's most sustainable SME. So when I first heard about this, I was really keen to get Gareth onto the ISO Show, because Seacourt is also certified to ISO 9001 and 14001. But I was really keen to hear about their sustainability journey and how they managed to get to be recognised as one of the top 3 leading environmental printers in the world. So yeah, it's a really interesting story. So without further ado, here to tell us more about Seacourt's journey and also their initiative, which is the Planet Positive Printing Initiative, I'd like to introduce Gareth Dinnage. Hi, Gareth.
Hi, Mel. Great to see you.
Great, and you. Yeah, thanks very much for joining us today. So, yeah, let's start right back at the beginning, if that's okay. Because I know that Seacourt's been around for a number of years now. Where did Seacourt begin, and how did your sustainability journey begin?
Yeah, so Seacourt, as you say, it's a grand old lady of a business, actually. We're no startup. So we started in 1946, believe it or not. So we are well aged. And we were just set up as a conventional printing company here in Oxford, looking after local businesses. And not a lot changed over the intervening 5 decades until the mid-90s, when the then owners had the good fortune to attend a seminar which was about sustainability and the printing industry. And this was in the mid-90s. So whoever put this together had incredible foresight to actually start to look at the commercial impacts and sustainability. So the guys went along and they weren't expecting this light bulb moment. But sure enough, when they were advised that, look, the print industry is amongst the 5th largest manufacturing sectors in the UK, this is in 1996. But the trouble is, it's the 4th worst polluter. And they walked away from that feeling pretty bad, pretty down in terms of being part of such a problem. And so they resolved to say, you know what, we really are not comfortable. We're family men. We don't want to be part of the problem. We would much rather be part of the solution. And so from that point in 1996, the business changed from just a linear business model where it's all about outputs and the single figure at the bottom of a P&L to actually becoming a values-based business, to actually considering the environmental impact, the impact that we have on society, as well as profits. And that was just at the time when the triple bottom line was being coined. And so, yes, that was the magic transformation. And for the last 25 years, our overriding philosophy has been, will this improve the environmental performance of our business? If it's a yes, we do it, regardless of financial cost. And so it's absolutely, Mel, about a change in mindset, because without that fundamental shift in terms of who we are and what we stand for, we wouldn't be the business we are today.
That's awesome. So I think, you know, in terms of the values of the organisation, it does really kind of lead any decision that you make, really, in terms of strategy and direction of the organisation, that environmental management is literally at the heartbeat of the business.
Absolutely. It's fundamental. It's who we are. And that's been a guiding principle, as I say, for the last 25 years, where we've gone from one of 20,000 at the time doing the same thing, working the same way, not questioning whether this was the right way. You know, was this the best thing that we could be doing? And then along the way, we've taken some, you know yourself, Mel, this is all about, there's no silver bullet. It's all about incremental steps to make yourself just that little bit better over time. And so, yeah, over the 25 years, we've done lots and lots of incremental steps. And so where we are now is that we're run on 100% renewable energy, have been for decades. We invented our own printing process called Light Touch, which has saved us millions and millions of fresh litres of water. We don't use any water in the printing process anymore. Printers use a huge amount of water. They then pollute it with really nasty chemicals. So we don't use any water anymore, and we don't need to use any chemicals in our printing process. We've also been zero waste to landfill for over a decade. We're carbon positive, and that's not just scope 1 and scope 2. We're actually scope 1, 2 and 3 carbon positive, one of the first companies, I believe, to have achieved that in the UK. And what that means for your listeners that aren't familiar with the concept is that we don't just feel that our impact is restricted to the four walls of our factory. We see our impact as more of our universe, which is every element that we as a business touch. So that includes our supply chain. So for us as a printing company, we take our impact all the way back to forestry. We take it back to the trees that we use for our natural resource, how those trees are transported to the paper mill, how the paper mill is run, the energy the paper mill is run on, the pulping process, then transporting that paper through to our factory. The same with our printing plates and our inks. And then, now it's not enough because then there's end of life to consider. And we're very fortunate because we're not producing plastic that's going to bob around in the ocean for millennia. What we're doing is we're producing a natural material which has massive recycling rates. So we don't need to worry about our end of life. And at the same token, our colleagues wouldn't be driving in their cars or jumping on trains to come to our plant in Oxford if we didn't exist. So we ought to take responsibility for that also. So when you wrap all this whole thing up in its entirety, we've created a thing that we call planet positive printing. And that means that we as a collective, ourselves and our wonderful clients, give back more carbon into the atmosphere than we are responsible for consuming.
Brilliant. I think that's so inspirational how you're going right back to forestry and then looking at the complete product life cycle and the impact that your business has, and including employees, clients and suppliers. It's a really inspirational story. So where do I begin? There are so many questions that are going around in my head right
now. Sorry, there's a lot to take on. I apologise.
It's great. So just going back then in terms of, so a lot of businesses are now thinking, right, this whole new kind of net carbon zero is new for most businesses right now. I mean, obviously you're well ahead of the curve in terms of being carbon positive. And I love the fact that you've branded that into your service offering, which is the planet positive printing. So I think if any of our listeners are listening in and use a printing company, then they know straight away how they can help their sustainability as an organisation by using suppliers such as yours to then have a positive, impact on the environment, not just negative or net carbon. But just going back to getting to net carbon then, in terms of understanding where you're at as an organisation, where your environmental footprint is, what does that look like? How did you go about doing that then, Gareth?
Yes, so in order for us to understand our impact, we have a very clever guy called Jake, who's our head of sustainability. We're incredibly lucky to have him. And Jake comes from a background as head of sustainability for Coca-Cola, amongst other things, and is a visiting fellow of Oxford Lineker College. So he is absolutely bright as a button on this very subject. And what we've had to do is unravel our entire supply chain and ask really challenging questions of our suppliers that no one has ever asked them before. So how do you transport your materials from the forest? What are the actual vehicles? What's the miles per gallon? How do you power your plants? What's the energy mix? What's the carbon impact per tonne of the paper that we're using? How do you transport it? What's the percentage that we as a business are responsible for? And so forth and so on. And we've got the thousands and thousands of tonnes of paper that we've purchased over a 12-month period. So we know exactly what we've bought, and we worked with our suppliers to really drill down and get an accurate carbon impact figure, and which, as I said, takes us right back from forestry to our door. When it gets into our factory, we're carbon neutral, and so there is no carbon impact because we've had that for an awful long time. But we had to create our own methodology, our own working, our own matrix. And what we did is we did the same process as our paper with our ink and with our printing plates, our end of life. We looked at our energy, which is scope 2, as you know, coming into the building. We even the fact that we're using renewable energy, believe it or not, is not enough for it to be zero carbon. There is still a carbon element involved. So it's really complicated stuff. We then bounced our findings off a consultancy called Anthesis, which were responsible for creating the zero carbon London Olympics. And so these guys are the forerunners globally of this reporting methodology. And so we bounced it off them, and they absolutely approved of our findings, of our workings. And then we worked with our good friends at Climate Care about, okay, we know exactly what our carbon impact is holistically for a 12-month period. What we're going to do about this stuff. And so we wanted to work on a project that is not just passive in its impact, but it's actually regenerative. And so there's a project in the Amazonian basin where we're safeguarding 86,000 hectares of endangered forestry. We're also reforesting 1,200 hectares of deforested land so that we're getting native species back in there. And the third element to this is the social impact, where we're now supporting a program with 50 indigenous population who are growing acai, superberries, which are a direct replacement to palm oil, which, as we know, is pretty destructive stuff. And so we wrap all this stuff up, and that's how we get to a planet positive printing element, is that every moment that we as a business are operating, that we're running, not just on a job by job basis, but in a complete approach, because we've measured and gone an extra 10% on everything that we're impacting on, we're giving back more than we're consuming. And so we know that it's no longer, we talk about net zero by 2030, well, or 2050, but we've got so far to go to get this done. And the amount of conversations I have with people saying, oh, I'm aiming for 2030. And my point is, guys, this is not a cliff edge. This stuff needs to be done now. It really needs to be done now. That's 9 years away, in which time you're going to grow, your impact's going to be greater, and therefore it's going to be even more of a struggle to actually change and start to be regenerative, which is exactly what we need to be.
Exactly. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. We don't want to wait until 2028 to start thinking about it. We do need to act now. You're absolutely right. So I'm just conscious of the fact that businesses listening to this will be thinking, well, we are in a lockdown at the moment. We are facing COVID, and there are a lot of businesses that are struggling financially, but it has led to a lot of innovation. But some businesses might be thinking, well, is it going to be really costly for me to be net carbon zero or carbon positive? And what would you say to businesses like that?
I'd say I completely understand this is the most challenging times, and I've sort of managed to guide us through the financial crisis in 2008, and this is significantly more challenging. But at the same token, I think it's imperative that we as business owners really do appreciate the impact and the importance of our actions, not just for the wider society, but if we actually become a bit more selfish and consider our own businesses the success of. Because what's happening is sustainability is not going away. Sustainability is growing. I have a 7-year-old son who challenges me daily about all sorts of things, which is absolutely fantastic. I love it. We've got an electric car. He loves the fact that we've got an electric car and the house is powered on renewable energy. These young people are going to be the customers of tomorrow. If your business is not understanding the impact of sustainability, if you do not have a strategic plan, if you do not have an idea of where you want to get to and how you're going to achieve it, your business will be left behind. And there will be other businesses that will pick up the leadership agenda and show exactly what business in all verticals can do, and it's those businesses which are going to be the most successful. We're seeing it already with investors pulling out of fossil fuel based businesses, which is absolutely awesome. Carbon Disclosure Project, we can see these A-listed companies in CDP are outperforming the rest of the stock market massively. There is so much good stuff. And if we as business people do not understand this, I think our companies are going to be left behind very, very quickly.
Yeah, I think that is the reality, isn't it? That it's not just about being seen to be doing the right thing. You need to prove that. You need to act responsibly to stay ahead of the game. And so I think obviously your company has used this as a real USP as well. So fundamentally, right back to to the values and what the business stands for. I think it's clear that it's not just about being seen to be doing the right thing, it's acting responsibly, and it's actually in the organisation's DNA and how you operate on a day-to-day basis, but also your future strategy. And clearly you were ahead of the curve a number of years ago when you first started out on this journey, and it's great to hear how you've not just kind of survived through the 2008 recession that we had, but also the COVID situation. It must be really difficult in the manufacturing industry and particularly in print as well, but it just shows that by investing your time and efforts and energy into your commitment to sustainability, how it's helped to kind of see you through that, and hopefully for many more years to come as well. Now, I know that we mentioned earlier on before we jumped on this call about B Corp. Could you just share with us a little bit about that and how you've been involved with that then, Gareth?
Yeah, so I'm really excited about B Corps now. I get excited about a lot of things, as you might be able to tell, but B Corp I'm really excited about. For those of you that aren't familiar, B Corp is the global movement that aligns businesses who share the same philosophy, and that is that business can and should be a force for good. So certified B Corps meet the highest standards of verified social and environmental performance, transparency and accountability. That's basically the strapline of it. In essence, we're basically the good guys who are committed to using business as a force for good. For me, it's the glue that binds organizations around the world. There are now 3,821 certified B Corps, with many more coming on stream. The UK is actually the second highest concentration of B Corps globally. We're represented in over 150 industries across 74 countries, and it's one unifying goal, and that's the belief that actually this is no longer business about shareholder value. This is about stakeholder value. We've even had to change our articles of association, which I was delighted about because it encompasses our whole mindset to say that actually every decision we make will be aligned equally with the environment and our social impact as well as profits. And that's beautiful because that's exactly what we've been doing for the last 25 years. And so with lockdown and the pandemic, we've been busy. We've become the highest scoring B Corp printing company on the planet, which is kind of cool.
That's amazing. Yeah.
And this really, does encapsulate everything that we believe. And to give you an idea of who else is part of this B Corp movement, little companies like Danone, Ben & Jerry's, Patagonia. In the UK, there's Cook, the great food company down in Kent. There's Abel & Cole. So it really is something that pulls people together that share a vision that, look, guys, business is no longer just about making a stack of cash. That's no longer good enough. We need to be better than that.
Yeah, and be part of that movement. Great. And I know that you've been certified to 9001 and 14001 for a number of years as well. So could you just share with us how that system helps you to run your business as well?
Yeah, so we've had 14,001 for over 20 years, 9,001 for over a decade. And it's just about, management tools to help us set the business up the best that we can and continuous improvement. It's just a case of having these tools at your disposal to ensure that you're considering all the impacts, you're looking for opportunities to further improve the performance of the business. And that in itself, with all the data that we collected over the 20 odd years, that's helped us form the bedrock of our B Corp, get us to where we wanted to faster.
Great. So looking at your supply chain, I think that you mentioned a number of different suppliers that you've looked at over the years. For those organisations that may have looked at their own environmental footprint but not yet gone down the route of looking at their supply chain, what kind of advice would you give them, Gareth?
Yeah, do the easy stuff first. Seriously, if you're going to embark on this, be prepared. It's easy to get a picture. The first things to do is look at your building, control your building, in terms of energy efficiency, really simple stuff. Make sure it's insulated. Then where's the power coming from? Make sure you're using renewable power. Then send out some customer surveys, some supplier surveys, and ask your suppliers, what are you doing? What are you doing that we don't know about? What sort of innovations are you working on? And then look at your key supply chains. And if you want to start mapping the carbon impact, and believe me, it is a big undertaking, but that is something which will give you a really interesting picture. As an aside, we established during the process, we're manufacturing, okay, I've got a factory beneath my office, and 95% of our carbon impact, 95% was in our supply chain, and we're a manufacturer.
Yeah, it's significant, isn't it?
Massive. Yeah. Absolutely massive. And that was to do with all the 20 odd years of work of driving process and change internally, so that we are absolutely working the best that we can and reducing and waste and everything else. But nonetheless, if that's the same for our supply chain, then many others are going to be having exactly the same number. And when we start to think about how can we actually create positive change, how can we create traction, engagement with your supply chain, you can see is kind of a big deal.
I think engagement is key, isn't it? Not just with your supply chain, but also with other stakeholders as well, whether that's investors or employees as well. So if the company is looking at starting out and looking at encouraging that engagement, could you give us any ideas on what you've done at Seacourt to encourage engagement, let's say with employees?
Yeah, we're really lucky. We have a fantastic team, and because of who we are, we attract people that want to work with us because they fundamentally believe in everything that we believe in. And for those colleagues that have been here for a long time, they've been part of the journey. And when you explain, we're getting some wormeries in, guys, because we want to divert our organic waste stream from landfill and we want to do something positive. They're like, yeah, brilliant. It sounds a great idea. And then all of a sudden we've got a load of volunteers to look after the worms. So the worms team, are happily looking after those. But it's all about not telling and directing, but it's encouraging and sharing and a collective togetherness in terms of identifying opportunities within the business. Me as the MD, I don't know the answers. The guys that know the answers, the people that are doing the jobs. And so when we have this open forum, guys, what can we do next? Where do we go from here? Because we've smashed through so many glass ceilings, but we've only been able to do so by having an open forum so that everyone is contributing and everyone is playing their part in the journey.
I love that, the concept of that, and you're not telling them what to do. It's all about them discussing, so what can we do next, and what's the solution to this, and getting them to think themselves and think outside of the box and come together to have those discussions, to share ideas, whether they're right or wrong. It doesn't really matter at that stage, does it? It's about looking at alternative ways of working that fit with your values and to help the company to be even more sustainable. So I think that's really impressive. And clearly you're getting good results out of that as well. I mean, was that one of the ways that you decided to go down this alternative way of printing and, to completely eradicate use of water?
Yeah, I mean, we had a philosophy that we believed in, but believe me, it's been tough. It's been a tough time because we've been so far ahead of the curve. I would have a conversation with businesses and say, look, we're doing this. We're the most sustainable printing company around. We'd love to work with you because we believe that you feel the same as we do about sustainability and reducing the heating of our planet. But the problem was a lot of people were not being tasked with that. They were not being challenged by their own companies. It was environmental performance was not high on the agenda for a long time. Thankfully, society is changing, and we're now, as a collective, are far more aware of our impacts and actually determined to do stuff about it. So yeah, we now have many more conversations with people that are really interested in what we're doing.
Fantastic. Well, I'm sure if any of our listeners are thinking of finding out about Seacourt's journey, then obviously I'd like to direct them over to your website. So could you just share with us your contact details then, Gareth, for the website, and if there's a LinkedIn contact or anything like that our listeners can get hold of you on?
Yeah, sure. Love you to, if you're interested, guys, come and have a look at seacourt.net. That's SEACOURT.net. We'll tell you all about planet positive printing and our journey and B Corps and anything else that you might be interested in knowing. I'm Gareth Dinnage and I'm on LinkedIn. So happy to connect, happy to hear your crazy ideas for sustainability. And if you want to bounce anything off me, yeah, always open for a conversation.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Gareth. And thanks for that inspirational story about your journey and where you're at as a business. And yeah, definitely a company to look out for in the future as well. So yeah, thanks once again, and congratulations on winning those awards, and in particular winner of the Queen's Award 3 times in a row. So a hat trick, I think that's definitely to be commended. So congratulations and well done for that.
Thanks very much, Mel. Thanks for having me on. It's great.
Great, you're welcome. Okay, so thanks very much for listening to the ISO show today. Before we call it a wrap for today, I'd just like to quickly share with you some exciting news. I'm actually going to be explaining a bit more about it in the next podcast, but last year during the pandemic, we applied for an Innovate UK grant to take our services online and in effect creating a Netflix version of ISO standard support. The new website is going to be www.isologyhub.com. And over there, we'll be hosting the ISO show podcast. So that'll be the new home for the podcast. But also, in terms of what that hub will provide, it's a membership to give you everything that you need in order to help you on your ISO journey. And also, if you're already certified to an ISO standard, it's also a place to go to get game plans to get you out of the trenches if you're stuck there with anything from engagement. So we've got the Engagement Amplifier game plan, which can help you with lots of hints and tips and action plans to help you to really encourage engagement across your organisation. So there's lots more information to come on that. And of course, there will be an ISO 14001 roadmap in there, which will all be based on our methodology, our ISology for implementing any ISO standard. So that's all from me for today. I look forward to catching up with you on the next ISO show.
Looking to use ISO standards to drive better business practice? Contact us at blackmoresuk.com to access further information and book your free 15-minute call.